Right, hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about the top 10 biggest movie mistakes ever to happen on set. Now, I know you're probably sick of YouTubers saying this, but please like and subscribe below because it means a lot and means I can get a bit extra money if this works out. But okay, let's just jump into the video, no messing, let's go. So coming in at number 10, we have a film that is actually a comedy, which you wouldn't think would cause much injury or death, but we have, at number 10, The Hangover Part 2. Now back in the 2010s, you couldn't really escape hangover mania. Everyone was talking about how funny it was, the Mike Tyson scenes, it was amazing. But in the sequel to the 2009 smash hit comedy, there was actually a scene where a stuntman ended up ripping off half of his face, believe it or not. And again, you wouldn't think a comedy such as The Hangover Part 2 would demand much in the way of stunt work, but it had a really sizable stunt. And the stunt team included someone called Scott McLean, who had previously done work in films such as The Matrix and Star Wars Revenge of the Sith. So in a scene that called for Ed Helms' character to stick his head out of a moving taxi, McLean, the stunt double, obviously jumped in to do that stunt. But the taxi ended up going way quicker than they thought and ended up colliding with another taxi that made McLean hit his head off the side of another car, which then subsequently made him rip half of his face off. To be more specific, McLean's injuries included having flesh torn from his skull and a large gash on the right side of his head. McLean just about survived the ordeal, but later argued that the vehicle was travelling much faster than it was supposed to, thus making the stunt much more dangerous than originally intended. McLean would then go on to sue Warner Brothers, and the case was settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. And moving on to number 9, we have Resident Evil, the final chapter. The conclusion to the long-running Resident Evil film franchise probably would have came and went with no one other than the franchise's devoted fanbase noticing that it was released in January 2017. But Resident Evil, the final chapter, got considerably more attention than anyone would have expected. Not because it's a good film, mind you, but because production had a massive tragedy. So first off, Mia Jovovich's stunt double, Olivia Jackson, who had worked on such blockbusters as Star Wars The Force Awakens and Mad Max Fury Road, was seriously injured while performing a motorcycle stunt. Jackson's left arm was pulverised and eventually needed to be amputated. Fortunately though, Jackson did make it through the tragic event with flying colours, or at least you can tell by her Instagram because she seems pretty happy now. Sadly though, Jackson's crash wasn't the only event to happen on this set. So in a separate event, a crew member named Ricardo Cornelius was killed when an unsecured car lid slid off the rotating platform and crashed into him. It's kind of crazy to think a film like Resident Evil that probably wouldn't have done that good at the box office ended up with someone amputating their arm and someone dying. It's such a shame. If you thought an amputated arm was bad, then how about a death that still can't be explained to this day? In number 8, we have Top Gun. This is one of those films that made Tom Cruise the megastar he is today. Most on-set disasters aren't much of a mystery. Stunt goes wrong, somebody dies, it's tragic. But these things happen. It's not every day that you hear about a production tragedy that can't be explained, and even rarer when a tragedy involves a plane crash, as of all things considering, flying remains the safest form of travel. One of the most famous stunt pilots in the industry was Scholl, who contributed to aerial photography and stunt work to all kinds of films and television, including The Right Stuff and Indiana Jones, The Temple of Doom. Naturally, a film like Top Gun made sense for him to jump on, because it fitted his skill set, but unfortunately, this would end up being his last. Whilst flying his Pitts S2 camera plane as part of an aerial stunt sequence, Scholl was unable to maintain altitude after performing a spin manoeuvre. Reportedly, his final words were, "I have a problem, we have a problem." Scholl's plane crashed into the sea and was never recovered, so sadly, it still remains a mystery even to this day. Now I know plane crashes are very dramatic, but how about a death by explosion? So clocking in at number 7, we have The Expendables 2. So as we all know, Sylvester Stallone's name is synonymous with manly action flicks, and his 3 Expendables movies are in no way different from this mindless but entertaining genre. As such, it's no surprise that these films called for mad stunt work and some crazy pyrotechnics, and in this regard, Stallone upped the ante considerably for The Expendables 2. For the sequel, Stallone opted out of the directing due to production difficulties of the original film, and seasoned actor filmmaker Simon West was then brought in for a replacement. Unfortunately, even West's seasoned oversight wasn't enough to prevent the unexpected tragedy from occurring. During a sequence shot by the film's second unit team, 2 stuntmen got too close to an explosion set off near a rubber boat. The explosion injured New's son and killed Conway. Lee's family ended up suing the producers for a wrongful death lawsuit. After a longed-out court battle lasting for years, Lou's parents were awarded a meager $195,000 in Hong Kong dollars, which is approximately $270 in the US, prompting Expendable star Jet Li to donate $80,000 US to the family. It just goes to show that producers can be scummy people even in the light of someone's death. So just like in films, when we see a human in danger or about to die, we're a bit desensitised to it at this point. We've seen it a million times. But when an animal is in danger, it makes it that much more worse. Unfortunately, in this next entry, it tells the tale of a film set that claimed the lives of up to 27 animals. Coming in at number 6, we have The Hobbit. Peter Jackson's 3-film, 9-hour adaptation of J.R.R. Tolkien's tiny fantasy novel The Hobbit was largely a waste of time and resources. Not just because the movies themselves were vastly inferior to Jackson's own Lord of the Rings trilogy, but because the production needlessly claimed the lives of multiple animals. According to an expose from The Hollywood Reporter, 27 animals died during production. While some of these deaths can be attributed to natural causes, many were direct results of poor living conditions and treatment. For example, sinkholes created by the underground streams became death traps for horses and other animals who would fall in and drown, or break bones, or asphyxiate. The Hollywood Reporter's report notes that the fault lies primarily with the Hollywood standard of self-regulation, which allowed the American Humane Association to avoid holding anybody accountable for the deaths because technically they didn't occur on a film set while they were filming. 27 deaths is ridiculous for a film set, especially with things like horses as well, bigger animals that need care and love just like the actors do. But that's how it goes. Now this is where things start to pick up a bit. We have probably the most gruesome and violent accident to ever happen on a set. At number 5 we have Transformers Dark of the Moon. So this actually only happened recently. This was the third film in the current Paramount produced franchise, and the last of the films to star Shia LaBeouf. In one of these scenes, several extras were offered $25 extra to drive their cars along a stretch of the highway, opposite a stunt that was taking place. Gabriela Cedillo, who was 24 at the time of shooting, was cruising in her car when a tow cable snapped from one of the stunt vehicles, whipped through the air, then plunged through her windscreen, striking her in the head. Don't get me wrong, the fact that she lived was miraculous, but her life is now that of a permanently disabled woman. She'll need 24/7 assisted care for the rest of her life. The production settled for $18 million in damages, but it's discouraging to know that the same stunt failed the day prior. It could have been prevented, and this is what happens on many film sets. They know it's not going to work, but they do it anyway because they've got the money. So the next entry in this list is one of the best films of probably the last 20 years. Now everyone is aware of Heath Ledger's tragic death, but this isn't about that. At number 4 we've got 2008's The Dark Knight. So everybody knows that The Dark Knight is dedicated to the memory of star Heath Ledger, who died months before the film's release due to a fatal cocktail of prescription drugs. What you may not have realised is that Christopher Nolan's film is also dedicated to the memory of stuntman Conway Wickliffe, who died on set. Wickliffe, whose resume includes the likes of Batman Begins and Casino Royale, was rehearsing a scene in which the Batmobile gets blown up by the Joker's rocket launcher. Whilst leaning out of the stunt car window to practice the stunt, the car's driver botched a 90-degree turn and collided with a tree at 20 miles an hour. The driver managed to escape the accident without injury, but Conway Wickliffe was not as lucky and suffered severe head trauma. He was unfortunately pronounced dead at the age of 41. Okay, now we're getting into the seriously shocking stuff, and you may have heard of a few of these, but you may not expect them to be in this order. At number 3, we've got the infamous incident on the set of The Crow. Most people are familiar with the tragic death of Brandon Lee, who was Bruce Lee's son. It occurred on the set of the 1994 action thriller The Crow, and it was a terrible oversight by the prop crew, as well as everyone who handled the prop .44 Magnum revolver on set. The gun had been used previously and loaded with set-made dummy bullets with the powder emptied as opposed to dummy cartridges or fake bullets that look real. Ultimately though, for some reason the props crew wanted the revolver to show its bullets when photographed by the camera. At some point, one of the bullets discharged due to an initial prime. This created an effect known as a squib load. It lodged the slug into the barrel. When blanks were added to the mix in order to shoot Brandon Lee's character, the slug was dislodged by the force of the blank, shooting Brandon in the abdomen. So obviously after this incident, regulations around guns on set changed, and even though it was back then, it was still tragic for the time. But you'd never think that would happen nowadays, not in a million years, especially not with a big star, never, right? But unfortunately, as of only recently, while I'm filming this video, which is the year 2021, history was going to repeat itself. At number 2, we have the widely known incident involving Alec Baldwin accidentally shooting and killing a crew member. We have the film Rust. As known by all film crews around the world recently, in October 2021, cinematographer Hutchens unfortunately was fatally shot, alongside the director also being injured on the film set of Rust. A prop revolver discharged a live round while being used by actor Alec Baldwin. The weapon had not been thoroughly checked for safety in advance. The incident is still being investigated by the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office. The production of the film was suspended indefinitely. The incident sparked debate on occupational safety in the film industry, the treatment of its employees, and the use of real guns as props. So even though it's still being investigated, allegedly several people are actually at fault for this incident. The set of Rust was already a hostile place. Articles tell that the crew had walked off just several days prior to this for poor working conditions, and allegedly someone had already been shot in the foot a few days earlier to this. So Alec Baldwin, the film's main star and producer, was the one who fired the gun, but he's not solely at fault. The assistant director came into the set and shouted "cold gun," meaning the god was safe, before handing it over to Alec. As well as this, there was an extremely inexperienced armourer who was on set in charge of the guns, and is largely at fault. So apparently the armourer on this set was actually the daughter of a really famous armourer, and she only got this job through, help and nepotism, and she didn't even want to be an armourer, she wanted to be an actress or a model. Now, I can understand this in any other role, but when it comes to weapons on set, you really can't be taking these risks. Whilst the last entry is probably the freshest on everyone's mind, coming in at number 1 without a doubt is one of the most tragic and heartbreaking incidents involving deaths of children on set. The the top of the list, it's number 1, we have 1983's The Twilight Zone movie. Twilight Zone the movie was a production effort from Steven Spielberg, using multiple directors to film 3 short films and play as a feature. It was a wonderful idea. The production was plugging right along until the director, John Landis, pressed ahead with an aerial stunt in high winds. The scene was to represent a racist man played by actor Vic Morrow walking in the Twilight Zone, aka Vietnam War, where he was forced to deal with his personal shortcomings in an effort to save 2 innocent children. In a scene that involved plenty of pyro, fireworks and a low-flying helicopter, high winds and pyrotechnics forced the helicopter into the path of Vic Morrow and 2 children, unfortunately, who were running through a small pond underneath the helicopter. The helicopter crashed, the rotor struck Vic and one of the children, tragically killing them instantly, and the remaining child was crushed by the skids. And that concludes today's video on the top 10 worst mistakes to ever happen on a movie set. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I do appreciate it. If you could leave a like and comment, whatever you want to do below, just to interact with me a little bit, I would really appreciate it. If you want to learn more about movies or hear about the reviews of new films that have come out, then please watch some of my other videos. I'm going to put them just there. That was a good one. Or just down here. That was also a good one. Try it. Thank you very much, guys, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.